Name of Foraus, and I'm very glad that you can come this afternoon for this event, Hybrid Warfare on the Border of Eastern Europe, that we organize in partnership with the Georgian think tank GeoCase. I will start to say a few words about Foraus and then let the floor to Matthias for the rest of the event. Just a few words about Foraus. We are a Swiss think tank on foreign policy, and we build bridges between science and politics about various topics and enthusiasts of foreign policy. And as a grassroots organization, we are supported by a large network of volunteers. And so we are a voice for young thinkers who would like to shape the foreign policy of tomorrow. And now about the program for this afternoon, we will start with a 20 presentation from His Excellency Mr. Lasha Daslaya, First Deputy Foreign Minister of Georgia. And then we will have a panel discussion with several experts, Dr. Emil Avdialani, Professor Dr. Katruna Bukadze, Dr. Cécile Drey-Schwab, and Dr. Jean-Marc Ricli. We will then finish this event with a little Q&A and a wrap-up session. And today the moderation of this event will be done by Matthias Rast. Matthias is co-head of the International Law Program at Foraus. He has worked as at the UN Yugoslavia Tribunal and in various functions from the Swiss Foreign Ministry. So Matthias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello from my side. Hello from the Foraus International Law Program. I'm really honored to be able to moderate this event, and I'm very happy that that we can do this together with GeoCase. And it's my pleasure to introduce you Victor Kipiani. Victor Kipiani is the chair of GeoCase and leads a team of experts and researchers there.
Thank you.
Beside his work for GeoCase, he's also a senior partner and co-founder of a law firm, and yeah, very much involved in international relations questions.
Thank you.
To you, Victor. Yeah.
Thank you so much indeed for these nice words, and thank you to Foraus for all your efforts and input and time. It's really a big privilege for us. The first time we're doing this similar event with a Swiss think tank, and we very much look forward to continuing our cooperation down the road. Indeed, the topic is extremely sensitive. It's extremely sensitive for all the democracies in the world, but it's also even double sensitive for those countries who are in the so-called gray zones, or the zones with low intensity conflicts. And Georgia is really an example of examining the worst consequences of the hybrid warfare. Actually, in our modern times, if you ask me, the current chapter of the hybrid warfare has started back in 2008 with Russian invasion to Georgia, and since then, our concern that the Western democracies, including the Georgian democracy, has not worked out efficient set of measures to counter the hybrid warfare. And that presents, I think, that the biggest problem and the biggest challenge. So we have numerous examples, we have numerous cases, we have numerous precedents, and this exchange of knowledge or experience, which we will be having today, and hopefully we will be having more in the future, will help us to provide stakeholders with specific recommendations, with specific advices, how to implement our observations into very practicable solutions, into very practical decisions, and very tangible actions. Like I've said, I'm joined in my discussions with my very esteemed colleagues, Dr. Burkadze and Dr. Avdeliani. But before that, it's my special pleasure to give a floor to Mr. Lasha Darsalia, who is the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Georgia. Mr. Darsalia is among those very few unique diplomats who has a first-hand experience of dealing with this plague of our modern times, and with many other threats and challenges, and with his extremely profound background and very rich experience of dealing with various stakeholders on the Georgian side, on the non-Georgian side. I'm pretty sure he will deliver a very thoughtful insight into the matter, and I very much look forward, like the rest of the audience, to hear Mr. Darsalia's speech. So, Your Excellency, the floor is yours, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vipiani. Thank you very much, and I would like to warmly welcome all the participants of today's webinar and use this opportunity to extend my sincere appreciation to both Foras and Showcase for organizing the discussion on such an important topic. Hybrid warfare has become one of the key security challenges worldwide, not only in our part of the world. However, the Eastern Europe, Black Sea, and the South Caucasus region have become the direct target of intensive hybrid warfare tools of Russia. This includes combination of conventional and non-conventional warfare tools, political manipulations, intensive disinformation and propaganda machinery to destabilize the region and the entire European security. All the destructive steps Russian occupation forces are taking in two Georgian regions of Abkhazia and Tkhinvali region, South Ossetia, and along the occupation line, be it active so-called borderization, illegal detentions, and kidnapping of Georgian citizens, daily provocations, cases of murder are part of Russia's hybrid warfare against Georgian government and people. The aim of Russia in this regard is to destabilize the situation in country, to discredit the image of the Georgian government and demonize the West in eyes of ordinary people, creating the wrong perception as if neither the government of Georgia nor the international community and the West can deal with and stop the powerful embrace of course Kremlin. Besides, Moscow uses active disinformation and propaganda campaigns in the occupied territories to strengthen anti-Georgian narratives and create the image of enemy among the residents of both Abkhazia and Tkhinvali regions. Georgia has also long been the target of malign propaganda and disinformation, undermining its aspirations to build a democratic European state. If we take a wider picture in the region, from the early on the Black Sea area in Europe's eastern flank have always been a crossroad of geopolitical interests, and it is especially so today, following Russia's re-emerging as an aggressive player, using a wide area of hybrid warfare tools and stepping over the international legal boundaries to achieve its goals. We see the Russian Federation using unresolved conflicts in the Eastern Europe area and the occupied regions as part of its hybrid warfare leverage to achieve its political goals. Europe's eastern frontier is now surrounded by Russian military strongholds. The base is equipped with the latest offensive weaponry and constant military exercises in Georgia's occupied territories and illegal annexed Crimea in eastern Ukraine and Moldova's Transnistria region create an extremely concerning picture for the whole European security. The recent outcome of the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, which further reshuffled the power balance in the region in Russia's favor, with Russia's further aggressive stance in Ukraine, the recent concentration of Russia's military forces in the illegally occupied and annexed Crimea, and the increased military activities in the eastern Ukraine create even more alarming setting for the occupied regions of Georgia. We continue seeing the active use of hybrid tactics by Kremlin, Russia's intensified steps towards de facto annexation of Georgia's occupied regions, and daily provocations on the ground, creating the risk of escalation and entailing grave humanitarian consequences. The implications of these actions go well beyond Georgia or the wider Eastern Europe area and is undermining the whole European security. What we are seeing in Georgia is rapid deterioration of the security and humanitarian situation in the occupied territories due to Russia's illegal actions and provocations. In parallel to the dehumanized phase of the occupation, Russia advanced in the process of de facto annexation of Georgia's occupied regions by adopting a program for establishing a so-called common social economic space with Abkhazia region. It is obvious that we are on the verge of the repetition of another Crimean scenario by Russia, which will leave a dangerous permanent mark on the security of the entire OSCE area. As we saw, the scale of Russia's hybrid warfare against Georgia has even intensified during the COVID-19 pandemic. When the entire world is focusing on combating the spread of the coronavirus, the Russian occupation forces, in gross violation of the EU-mediated 12th August 2008 ceasefire agreement, have enhanced the illegal process of military buildup and so-called borderization, kidnappings and illegal detentions, closure of the occupation line and further impediments for the urgent medical evacuations, grave violation of human rights and ethnic discrimination of Georgians. Here, let me highlight the case of illegal detention of Georgian citizen Mr. Zasar Akheladze, who was shot and wounded by the occupation forces and then captured in illegal custody for more than 12 years. This is a vivid demonstration of how the Russian occupation regime disregards even humanitarian issues, trying to use them for political purposes. I would like to use this platform to call on Russia to ensure immediate release of Zasar Akheladze and all illegally detained Georgian citizens. We would like to urge our partners to take effective steps to facilitate that Mr. Akheladze returns to see his family shortly. In order to address this gross violation of human rights in the occupied regions, the government of Georgia adopted what was already Tatunashvili list, a list of persons accused and convicted of grave human rights violations in the occupied region. It is particularly worrisome that against the background of given deteriorating situation on the ground, we witness Russia's destructive actions undermining the very negotiation formats which are designed to deal with the security and humanitarian challenges stemming from Russia's occupation through politicized humanitarian issues and hampering substantial discussion in the Geneva International discussions, while the IPRM's meetings in Gali have been blocked for 3 years. And moreover, Russia blocks the access of international human rights mechanisms in the occupied regions. Even the European Union monitoring mission, which is the only international mission in the country overseeing the implementation of ceasefire agreement, is still denied access to Abkhazia and Trimali regions of Georgia, contrary to the mandate of the mission. The pro-Kremlin, and I really want to say a few words about the Russian propaganda as well. Pro-Kremlin media tries to sow the seeds of skepticism both within the Georgian population as well as among the international partners of Georgia. The narrative claims that the West needs Georgia as a proxy to destabilize Russia. These allegations are backed up by the increased NATO presence in the Black Sea Basin and Lugar-like laboratories encircling Russia, using the Russian terminology. Georgia is portrayed as an ungrateful nation, having its back turned to its Orthodox Christian brother in order to pursue European and Euro-Atlantic integration, which is bound to fail. The narrative of shared religion is utilized to undermine the support to pro-Western foreign policy, which remains high among the population of Georgia. Particular characteristic of the Russian modus operandi in Georgia is an emphasis put on the negative portrayal of the West, rather than positive picture of Russia itself. A multi-layer narrative aims at growing divide in societies, fostering despair and hopelessness, crippling trust in the institution, as well as confidence in the country's foreign policy. With regards to the occupied regions, the pro-Kremlin media frequently emphasizes Russia's peacekeeping goals and retells the events of the 2008 Russia-Georgian war in this prism. Unfortunately, in 2020, with the surge of the COVID-19, new narratives emerged, claiming the government of Georgia was deliberately trying to spread the virus at the occupied territories, while Richard Lugar Center for Public Health Research in Tbilisi was accused of creating a COVID-19 virus and conduct other covert biological activities. The period of COVID-19 pandemic particularly remarkable with Russian media claiming that the government of Georgia was deliberately trying to spread the campaign attempting to undermine the international standing of both the United States and Georgia was voiced not only by the Russian disinformation media, but also became the subject of official statements of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. By attacking Georgian economy and claiming it is bound to collapse, Russia also continues to try to solve despair and hopelessness in society. Currently, Russian propaganda machine is directed to deter process of vaccination, simultaneously advancing its own product. In parallel, it is visible that Russia supplements its latest hybrid tactics with the cyber attacks. In October 2019, Georgia fell victim to large-scale cyber attack. The investigation conducted by the Georgian authorities in cooperation with the United Kingdom and other international partners concluded that this cyber attack was planned and carried out by the main division of General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, military intelligence arm of the Russia. In conclusion, our well-considered choice and response to these challenges is Georgia's irreversible move towards peace, prosperity, consolidation of democracy and European and membership to the European family. I'm proud to say that throughout the latest years, my country has become a success story in its European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations, being an EU-associated partner with the deep and comprehensive free trade and the visa-free regime with the European Union, as well as an aspirant and reliable partner of NATO that largely contributes to the global security. Against all odds, we have demonstrated a significant progress in democratic transition, parallel succeeding in good governance, rule of law, and human rights protection. Recently, the government has taken a historic step launching the progressive electoral reforms and constitutional amendments that are based on the best European traditions of parliamentary democracy. With such an outstanding track record, Georgia has been rightly seen as a top reformer in the Eastern Europe. Along with that, the government firmly pursues the peaceful conflict resolution policy, trying to resolve the Russia-Georgia conflict through dialogue and peace negotiations. Tremendous efforts have been invested in the Geneva international discussions in an attempt to find durable solutions for addressing the security and human rights challenges of the conflict-affected people stemming from the Russian occupation. However, our steadfast stance to peace and security and compliance with the 12th August 2008 ceasefire agreement has not been reciprocated by Russia up to this point. The reason is simple. Moscow is not showing willingness to engage in a meaningful talks and continues to play the role of a sideline observer. Despite numerous impediments, the government is unequivocally implementing the reconciliation and engagement policy to build trust between the people across divides and ease the burden of occupation for the people living in Abkhazia and Skhirovali region. I want to thank all the participants one more time, and will be in your disposal for some of the time. Unfortunately, I want to excuse myself. I can stay only next half an hour with the team, and I'm again glad being today with you here.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for those very interesting and insightful points. It's it's always very good to hear firsthand the perspective of someone who is in the region, yeah, thanks for being around a bit longer. If the panel will have questions, we'll address them to you. Talking about the panel, it's my pleasure to introduce it. We have firstly Ms. Cécile Drouet-Schwab. She holds a PhD in International History and Politics from the Graduate Institute in Geneva. Since 2018, she's a senior researcher in contemporary Eastern Europe history at the University of Bern. And her main academic interests are conflicts and peace-building approaches in the post-Sovietic space, with a special focus on Ukraine and the Caucasus.
Thank you, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Then we have Mr. Emil Avdaliani. He holds a PhD in military strategy from Tbilisi State University. And at the same university, as well as at the Ilia State University, Mr. Avdaliani currently teaches history and international relations. Mr. Avdaliani is also part of GeoCase, and there he is the head of the Middle East Studies program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Then also from Georgia, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Khatuna Burkadze. She has a PhD also from the Tbilisi State University, and has been a visiting professor at 3 universities, Columbia University, Bard College, and the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. She has also various experiences working for the Georgian state. She's been employed by the parliament, the office of the prime minister, as well as the Supreme Court. So a very holistic view, I would say. And Ms. Burkadze is also part of GeoCase, and there she's the director of the American and Euro-Atlantic Studies. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And last but not least, we have Mr. Jean-Marc Ricli. He's also holding a PhD, in this case in international relations from Oxford University. Mr. Jean-Marc Ricli is the head of global and emerging risks at the Geneva Center for Security Policy, the GCSP. It's in Geneva. And among other activities, he's also the co-chair of the working group on emerging security challenges at the NATO Partnership for Peace program. And previously, Mr. Ricli was also assistant professor at the Department of Defense Studies at the King's College in London.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So maybe to start off, we now have quite a good perspective from our Georgian colleagues. I would be very interested to hear from Cécile Druillet and also from Jean-Marc Ricli, who both work from Switzerland, mainly what role this concept of hybrid warfare plays in their work, in their research. And maybe, and this is maybe not so easy, I discovered when I researched a topic that there is a lot of different definitions of this term, and often they're also quite long. So maybe as an exercise, if you could give me a 1-sentence definition of what hybrid warfare means for you, that would be wonderful. Maybe starting with Cécile Druillet-Schwab.
Well, I'm not so much of a theorist and not so much of a war theorist. Usually I speak rather about conflicts, not about warfare, but I would say, like, spontaneously that hybrid warfare is, or hybrid conflict is a conflict that is fought on different levels by different means. That's my sentence.
I mean, it's very difficult to define this term because it's a very controversial term. As you mentioned, I am a co-chairman of the working group on emerging security challenges at the NATO Partnership for Peace Consortium, and we're currently drafting a curriculum on hybrid warfare. And it's definitely not a topic that is easy to define because it's a bit a catch-all concept. You know, in studying war, you have concepts that are coming up every a few years, and we had in the past symmetrical warfare, and now we have hybrid warfare. Hybrid warfare refer to methods of fighting war that basically blend the conventional and non-conventional aspect of war, and through coercion below the level of direct warfare. But then, if you unpack, which I might do during this concept, you'll see that what is really new is not so much the concept as such, because it has been applied in the military for as long as warfare has existed. But what is changing is the context in which warfare is being waged, and we might discuss that a bit more later, maybe.
Okay, thank you. And maybe just back to you, Ms. Truye, you said you're less into a warfare theory and definition of such concepts, maybe in general. Did I understand correctly? You're more researching what that actually means for populations that may be affected by such practices on the ground.
Well, actually, I propose, do you have time, or do you want, again, an answer in one sentence? Because if I have time, I can explain my concept of research. But if I have only 1 minute, it's a bit difficult.
No, please, you have a bit more time, yes. Okay,
thank you. So I actually would call, also in my research, which is basically on the conflicts of the post-Soviet space and of the protracted conflicts in different areas, yes. I propose to look at the notion of hybrid conflicts a bit with more distance, actually, because I think it's very important, as also Mr. Rickley said, to contextualize the action. So first of all, we should distinguish different levels. In my working definition, I use 3 different levels. So the first level would be the geopolitical Cold War conflicts in the post-Soviet space. So this is all of these conflicts, actually the actual, also the past conflicts in the post-Soviet space since the disintegration of the Soviet Union. They have a dimension of Cold War or Neo-Cold War. It's between states and or strategic alliances. There is clearly an East-West division, and it's about interest, but also about ideology. So we have this difference in worldviews and in ideology. Here also we should mention the frozen conflicts. So if we speak about hybrid conflicts, it's not possible not to speak about frozen conflicts, because this is actually the geopolitical instrument used by Russia to exert pressure. So the frozen conflicts can be frozen and unfrozen. The next level of conflict, so this is the geopolitical level of conflict. Actually, the next level of conflict in the post-Soviet space is the territorial identity conflict. Again, this is a working definition by myself, so it's not, some people also call it ethno-territorial conflict. So this is especially a term from the 1990s. It exists actually when there is a crisis, contested sovereignty, to speak in legal terms also, between a mother state and a territorial entity which is inside of this mother state, an ethnic minority, but it's not always an ethnic minority if you look at Donbass. So this is, then we have this ethno-territorial conflict inside. So this is mainly the 1990s, I said, is Nagorno-Karabakh, South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Chechnya also, but more recently also the Donbass conflict. And we can speak here also about a conflict of nationalism. So different nationalism actually clashing. Matryoshka nationalism is a very interesting term we heard from Ian Bremmer, which means that in the post-Soviet space, these territorial entities with the new successor states, they have inside a conflict with minorities, which are then appealing to the outer slice of nationalism, which is the Soviet slice. So we see actually with this Matryoshka nationalism, the Abkhaz, the Ossets, but also in Donbass, people are appealing to the former center of power, which is Moscow. So this is the ethno-territorial conflict level, but then very importantly, the conflicts have a third level also, which is the civic identity conflict level, which means that actually inside these societies, in Georgia and Ukraine, we have divisions between different slices, groups of society, between society and states, which is reflected in the civic upheavals we have against the authoritarian state and against Russia and the reimposition or the reinforced presence in the near abroad. This civic upheaval is, for example, the color revolutions of the 2000s in Georgia, the Rose Revolution, the Ukrainian Orange Revolution, Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan, etc. So this is just a few examples, and all conflicts in the post-Soviet space, they have these three levels of conflict. And inside society, this is reflected. So people actually get in conflict also over world differences in the geopolitical worldview, they get in conflict. So this is very much affecting the alienation inside society. It's not only a geopolitical case, conflict is not only a societal conflict, but it's a bit of everything. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And yes, I think it's important to not only see this from a geopolitical side, because I think often that's a bit what we fall into. Yes. Maybe back to our panelists from Georgia. You're welcome to react on this. But I also have a question to Ms. Burkadze regarding legal implications. I think you did research on this, what this could mean also from a legal standpoint.
Thank you so much for this question. I did research about international legal aspects of cyber attacks and cyber warfare. I would like to pay special attention to cyber attacks as one of the key hybrid threats. We know that information and communication technologies have changed the concept of an armed attack. The current international legal regulations do not address cyber attacks and cyber warfare. The UN Charter was adopted in 1945 when the creation of cyberspace was a matter of future rather than considerations of those times. Because of the gap between policy and law, I think that the following questions should be raised. First, can a cyber attack be considered as an armed attack under the international law? Second, if yes, how could the UN Charter be interpreted in order to clarify under which circumstances the right of defense could be invoked against cyber attacks? We can say that international legal regulations, including the UN Charter, apply to cyberspace. And for this, I would like to emphasize that Tallinn manuals provide very good interpretation of the current international legal regulations. Why we think that these regulations apply to cyberspace? Due to the following reasons. First, a cyber attack can reach a threshold that threatens states' national security. And second, the impact of cyber attack can be as harmful to states as conventional military operations. And in view of the foregoing considerations, I think that it's so important to analyze key criteria of cyber attacks based on Article 51 of the UN Charter. First, based on this article, an armed attack represents a legal ground for using the right of defense. Second, due to the destructive nature of cyber attacks, interpretation of this article has been expanded to include cyber attack as an armed attack. In particular, the international group of experts agreed that scale and effects are quantitative and qualitative factors that would apply when determining if a cyber attack qualifies as an armed attack. Tallinn Manual defines a cyber attack as offensive or defensive actions that are reasonably expected to injury or death to persons or damage or destruct to objects. This means that a cyber attack can rise to the level of an armed attack if such actions caused injury, death, or other substantial destructions. And third, during such cases, states should take into consideration the following elements: scope, duration. Is this attack a single event, or is it an integral part of a longer campaign? Intensity scale: has this attack caused destructive effects? And external actors. I think that such interpretation, regardless of the lack of an exact regulation with regard to cyberspace, will reduce ambiguity and will allow states to better overcome cyber challenges in the future or mitigate these risks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this panorama with the IHL points, Tallinn Manual, and also the law of self-defense charter. Maybe to Mr. Avdaliani, for me it's still a bit difficult to understand why we have, like, what the use is of this concept that is so broad. I mean, now we heard a lot about cyber, and we also learned that, I mean, that cyber is at least according to the Tallinn Manual is part of IHL, but there is also various and very different other aspects that are often counted into hybrid warfare. I mean, disinformation is quite far away from a cyber attack. So it's a term that is also often called umbrella term, and is also criticized for that. And Jean-Marc quickly also mentioned that it's a controversial term. What's your opinion on the raison d'être and the advantage of having such a concept?
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, beyond the cyber attacks, so there are plenty of other uses of hybrid warfare. And just to state a few such interventions in the foreign elections and purposeful propaganda of malign, infusion of malign information into sensitive regions, sensitive areas, and so on and so on. I mean, in terms of case of Georgia, the propaganda which was played out during the Second Karabakh War is one of the perhaps study cases for for researchers of this topic. But it's interesting to look at all those uses of hybrid warfare from a wider perspective, I would say, and why Russia has been using these methods since basically early 2010, or basically over the past 10 or 15 years. And it's quite interesting that we usually pay attention to the so-called Gerasimov doctrine and so on, and perhaps the scholars already stated clearly that the name of this doctrine is sort of a misnomer, I would say, and sort of a broader understanding should be applied. And I would rather say that I think when we talk about how Russia uses the hybrid warfare in Eastern Europe or worldwide, we should also know that there are certain limits to its success, and I'm quite sure that the Russian leadership understands the probable success and failures which could be resulted from its use. And I would say that as a starting point, when the Russians generally began to use the hybrid tactics, is probably late 90s, when the clear decision was made to pursue, again, great power status and to pursue the foreign policy which will be based on the introduction of multipolar world. And this is a very important question, because when we look at the hybrid warfare and sort of discuss it in an isolated manner, it doesn't really provide all the rationale and logic to understand why the hybrid warfare is being used in a way it is used, and in this particular moment. And I think that if you look at the broader picture, the broader global geopolitical picture, and specifically how Russia began to view the world around it and what kind of world order it wanted to build, then you clearly see that hybrid warfare is one of the tools to use the multipolar world, basically undermine the liberal internationalism and to pursue the line where a concert of great powers would be emerging. And Russians are using various tactics basically in hybrid warfare. So they might be using it on a regional level, local regional level, and then on global level. So they clearly know what each operation should be achieving. And perhaps the most global aspect is the involvement in the US elections. But on the local level, it's more might be related to small territories such as Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region, or in eastern Ukraine. So basically, I would rather say that Russia is simply using all the available tools to influence either regionally or globally the processes which eventually should lead to the toppling of the liberal internationalism and basically introduction of the concept of great powers, essentially, and one of which Russia should be. That's at least in Moscow's opinion, Moscow's view. Yeah, basically that's major points which I wanted to make. I mean, if I have time, I could go, later on, perhaps just to elaborate a bit more on each of them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Artaliani. Yeah, we heard it before. It's a concept that is is perceived as coming from Russia. I'm a bit wondering, and maybe this is for you again, Jean-Marc, quickly. Like, what's the Russian view on this? I mean, Russia could also be the target of hybrid attacks. We have in Geneva at the Putin-Biden meeting, Mr. Biden, for example, also mentioned the example of extensive cyber capabilities, and the example of how it would be like if a Russian pipeline would be attacked by ransomware. Why is Russia so allergic to this term?
Yeah, I would qualify what you just said. It's a Russian concept. It's not actually. I mean, hybrid warfare grew up from the acknowledgement of the outcome of the first Gulf War in 1991. So basically what happened here is that the West demonstrated its conventional power in fighting conventional war. And so potential candidates for contestants of the international order at the time started to think about ways to actually undermine the West. And what you see is not just Russian that they developed or came up with this concept, but at the end of the 90s, you have two Chinese colonels who wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare. And basically what they acknowledged there was that it was useless trying to challenge the United States and its allies on conventional terms. Therefore, any way for fighting the West should look at its weaknesses. And what is interesting was that at the same time, around 1996, a person called Osama bin Laden actually reached the same conclusion, that it was pointless trying to attack the West on conventional terms, and they had to find the weakest spot in the West. And it turns out that in democracies, the weaknesses of democracies are actually its people. And so what happened around the 2010 is with development of digital technologies as well now artificial intelligence, it has become possible to actually create an effect in democracies without having to use military force. And we've seen that on a couple of occasions already with the US presidential election in 2016, in 2020. So trying to interfere into elections by, for instance, animating online groups that are supporting a cause, and at the same time supporting the other one. And there is an instance in the United States in 2016 where it was actually probably the Russians that were behind that. They created this Facebook group where one was anti-racist and the other one was from the far right. And at one point, one of these groups called for a physical protest in the streets in a city in the United States. And suddenly what happened was you had two groups, undergrounds in the United States, that were actually facing each other, were about to fight each other. And that had been actually engineered through the aggregation of anger on social media. So talk about Gerasimov doctrine, which doesn't exist as such, but the idea is that with the increased digitization of the world, it has also become more possible to reach or at a distance, democracies and others type of regime. So we are not just talking about the use of cyber operation. We are talking about changing trying to foster domestic rivalries and fight. We are also talking about using commercial instruments that could have an impact. Law is also a tool that could be used, and you have to look at context-specific characteristic. For instance, the Chinese are using, hybrid warfare in the China Sea through the use of fishing boats that they project into these small islands in the South China Sea to claim actually their territorial control over this. And so this is something that is below the threshold of war, and therefore it is very difficult to actually answer and reciprocate to this, because if you go too far, you are being considered as the aggressor, and if you are not responding at the appropriate level or too weakly, then the other wins. So this is why this concept is very popular.
Okay, that's interesting. A concept that focuses on our fault lines and on the weaknesses of our societies. Maybe a follow-up again to you, Jean-Marc, quickly. You're in Geneva. You're at the GCSB. What do you think then on a multilateral stage? What is the best forum? How can we tackle this problem, this fact?
Again, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, because I mean, we've been talking about election tampering. I've just mentioned the example of using fishing boats to create fait accompli. It has to be context dependent. So we can identify some red lines, which you mentioned before, the Biden-Putin summit that took place last week in Geneva. Apparently Biden notified Putin about some red lines, 16 types of critical infrastructure that should be out of reach in terms of a cyber attack. But again, you can do that, but by doing that, it's a double-edged sword, because on the other hand, what Biden also signified to Putin is that all other critical infrastructure outside of these 16 categories could be attacked. This is also the flip side of the coin. And so because it is below the threshold of war, there is no agreement, about how to respond to this action, and also it's also very difficult to identify. So there is this, we haven't talked about the use of proxies that I call surrogates, and this is a logical development of the growing privatization of warfare and violence. And so by using surrogates, what you do, you are creating plausible deniability. And so when you create this gray zone, this situation where you cannot affirm with firm facts that someone is behind that, then it's very difficult to actually respond to this. This is why also it exploits some loopholes into a formal legal system.
Thank you. So maybe from meetings like Biden, Putin, back to the societies where the impacts are felt. And Jean-Marc quickly mentioned the weaknesses and the break lines of societies, especially the democracies. Either to our Georgian colleagues, maybe also Cécile Drouillet, how can societies in Eastern Europe, especially the Georgian one, also from inside be more resilient to such hybrid attacks?
Shall I start and then they go on?
Yes, please.
I think it is very important in this on this background, actually, also you see, because what I try to explain with the different levels of conflict is also that the different I mean, this is I agree that hybrid warfare or hybrid conflict is not only with Russia, but in the post-Soviet space, we have certainly a strong Russian component with it. So actually, this is an attempt to react to the different level of conflict and to react to this and to work inside the contested territories in order that it is in a favor of the outside actor, the external actor. But if we look at inside this, the societies, I think it is not possible only to go from a grassroots level, so a bottom-up peace building. It is also not possible to go only from a top-down, so with like negotiation solutions, mediation, external actor, OSCE, UN, other external states. So it is actually a construct of peace building or conflict management or conflict resolution processes that has to go on different levels at the same time. And that means that the efforts done at the state level are very important, but they have to be supplemented by intra-society dialogues. So if we have, for example, different interest groups, like I have quite some experience in the Ukraine-Russian landscape. So if we have different interest groups, for example, working on the same issues, it can be in the field of arts, in the field of agriculture, in the field of like also university. There has to be contact between the societies in order to maintain and develop the structure of cooperation that exists or that existed and was interrupted. So this is the state initiatives, and then we have, of course, the international initiative. Normally when you speak about peace building, it's always this international perspective. Yes, you have the peace building, like mediation and somebody like being responsible, being a guarantor. Of course, you need this, but you need also these intra-society dialogues in order to make societies resilient against. And this can be also inside the state, so inside Georgia, inside Abkhazia, inside South Ossetia, to learn how to build peace or how to be resilient against re-escalation of war. So yeah, leave for a moment the geopolitical factor aside and go inside society. Of course, it's not enough. It's at both levels that we have to make our efforts.
Okay, both levels and inside society. Yeah, this clearly is a question that would go to Mr. Avtaliani or Ms. Brucazzi. What can be done within society at the example of the Georgian society? Whoever thinks that he or she is in a place to reply.
Yeah, I would just answer it in a very short manner. Yeah, I mean, the question, of course, is a very difficult one because it relates, you know, to nationalism, to various sentiments on both sides. And it truly is very difficult to build or perhaps you have to have numerous platforms which over time, maybe even over decades, would be able to or enable the population on both sides and to cooperate, to basically engage with each other. And you know, there are plenty of organizations which are doing this work, but the impact is quite limited. And of course, geopolitics matters in this case because still overall geopolitical context sort of rules out possibility of very quick or even decade-long improvement between Georgians and Abkhaz, Georgians and Ossetians. But at the same time, there is also an understanding that both sides should get rid of the nationalistic perspectives. And this also relates to education and various forms which help youngsters on both sides, to establish basically their understanding of each other. So it goes to basically every level of life, every context basically of ordinary people on both sides, and you have to basically build bridges. And as I said, geopolitics sort of obstructs this level of engagement, but at the same time, there are sort of crucial work which should be done, on both. So you cannot really resolve or make a progress in this conflict if only one side makes a crucial difference. So both sides should be working towards a certain goal, and on that level, I think without major concession from either of the side, geopolitical context will be the force which will basically drag this conflict on and on for decades onwards.
Is there also more room for improvement in terms of regional cooperation? Because sometimes I feel that it's quite easy to divide and conquer, if you like, in this region, because there is not always a great cooperation in such issues among states. Maybe Ms. Burkadze, what do you think on this?
As for cooperation among states, of course, when we talk about hybrid threats, especially when we talk about cyberspace, we know that cyberspace is not bound by particular boundaries, and in order to develop a common vision for secure and stable cyberspace, close cooperation with partners is one of the preconditions. For us, for Georgians, close cooperation with partners, with the United States, with the United Kingdom, and other partners are crucial in this process, because through this partnership we are able to conduct joint exercises, joint cyber exercises, in order to enhance our cyber security capabilities. Also, I think it's important to enhance not only bilateral relations, also it's important to enhance multilateral relations in this field as well. But unfortunately, currently we do not have a common vision at the universal level. We have a regional vision how to counter hybrid threats at a regional level in case of NATO. NATO has a very clear vision how to counter hybrid challenges, and this vision is based on 3 pillars. To be prepared for hybrid threats, and this means to gather information on possible negative, destructive hybrid actions and equip decision makers with appropriate knowledge. Another pillar is about to enhance deterrence policy in order to prevent destructive, negative effects of possible hybrid actions. And if deterrence fails, states need to enhance defense capabilities in order to be able to react rapidly. And I think that based on this experience, we can develop at the national level as well our vision how to counter hybrid threats, how to overcome challenges with regards to cyber incidents, disinformation, propaganda, and other challenges. Also, states need to support scholars in order to do researches on tactics of hybrid actions, non-military characteristics of such actions. Also, it's important to enhance institutional reforms in order to protect critical infrastructure as well. And of course, for this, we need to design university programs for training specialists in this field and to implement projects for raising awareness on hybrid threats, especially techniques of disinformation. And I think these reforms at the national and international level will help states to mitigate these risks better in the future.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for those points on possible or better coordination to commonly counter such hybrid attacks. Victor Kipiani,
just one minute.
Raised his hand. Yeah.
You know, of course, when we speak about the counter hybrid warfare, the measures, those discussions, when those are conducted between decision makers, those discussions should be conducted without any constraints and should be as broad as possible. But when we speak about the resilience of the community, what makes me to think, and this is a very subtle point, that probably it's a very controversial, but from Georgian perspective, at least to share with you, I think that any discussions at the level of the communities, local communities, should be well measured, well balanced, and well focused. Because it seems to me that more we speak about the, say, Russian hybrid threats, more we're exposing them, but not discrediting, not diluting the capabilities of Russia. More we're creating an effect of, instead of building resilience, we as if we're diluting, that resilience. And it runs, I would also make a comparison with a terrorist. A terrorist, a damage which he produces on the spot is quite often much more limited than the fear itself, than the terror itself. So once we are not prepared to speak effectively about countering hybrid attacks, more we speak in non-constrained manner, more we speak, at the every corner of the public, just without discrediting, as I'm saying, without exposing. I think that we are sort of, we are inflicting the damage on ourselves rather than preventing that damage. And in that way, we're as if unwillingly we're playing into the hands of those perpetrators. So this is again, how that could be well measured, well balanced. But I think that that's something which we should be paying due respect. To sum up, this topic cannot be discussed equally and to the same extent at every level of society unless we are not prepared to educate, to elucidate, and to bring well-focused responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor Kapiani. Yeah, I think this work within society is absolutely crucial. And we have two questions already that came up also regarding cooperation. One regarding the Eastern Partnership and how it could develop a better cooperation to counter disinformation. And another one that I received via Q&A is the question regarding the European Union and whether the European Union also creates itself a narrative that is too anti-Russian. Yeah, maybe Jean-Marc Rickley. regarding one or the other. What is the role of the EU, maybe?
Well, what the recent Biden trip to Europe showed that was that the Americans have decided who their strategic rival is, and it is China. And so if you look at the NATO summit that took place right before the Biden-Putin summit, here you can see that the NATO member states highlighted Russia as still the major threat, but also raise up the issue of China. And so what we see in the EU is in a way a division of perspective between probably Eastern European countries and Western European countries. If you look at France, France now is actively pushing for having a Pacific agenda. The same with Germany. You can see that Germany for the first time had adopted a China policy last year. Obviously, the smaller countries, European countries in the eastern part of Europe are much more concerned with the Russian bear than China. And so on the other hand, what we also see is that the Russians have demonstrated that they have ways to basically increase the level of instability in Europe. And what we've seen, for instance, last week or a few days ago with the incident in Crimea between the British ship and the Russian armed forces, in an international environment where there are some tensions and the rivalry is building up, what you want to avoid is a situation that could spill out of control. And so even though there are some countries who are arguing for adopting tough approach towards Russia, it's not enough. You also have to let communication channel open so as to cool down when an incident happened. So overall, what we see, we have to be very firm in Europe towards our potential adversaries, not to let them penetrate the system. And I think the previous speaker mentioned the issue of resilience. Resilience is very important because the concept of resilience is not about defending, so identifying threats and trying to defend against these threats, is hardening systems so that when they are hit, they continue to be functional. And that we could talk about resilience in the cyber domain, or we can talk about resilience at the domestic level in terms of resilience of society. So we have to build up this, but you also have to be, firm in your response to potential tactics that involve hybrid warfare, while at the same time letting communication channel open, because you don't want a situation to spill out of control.
Thank you. Regarding the importance of resilience, the role of Switzerland, we haven't talked about it, and maybe this question goes to Cécile Truier. You also worked at the Swiss Foreign Ministry, and you have a good perspective on those societies. What can a state like Switzerland do to help improving such a resilience?
Well, I think what we did at the level of Ministry of Foreign Affairs is done is probably rather like this, talking about the burning issues at the official level. So this is rather like in the field of mediation or good offices. For example, representation of interests in Georgia, the Russian representation of interest, or the Russian interest, or in Russia, the Georgian interest. So this is rather at the diplomatic level. But of course, there are a lot different, many different things that Switzerland is doing. This is only like the top level. So after Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have been working for Swiss Peace for 6 years. So this is maybe rather the level like of peace building, more concrete initiatives we can support, or we can do. Also, the Minister of Foreign Affairs have their divisions also developing like this more project-based support. I think, well, in the Abkhaz-Georgian case, for example, there are projects dedicated to the historical memory, talking about, this is a very hot issue, yes, in Abkhazia and in Georgia, so this is something very controversial. Like the responsibles of the war, the responsible of earlier contact, or for example, artifacts, what like the monuments, to whom do they belong, etc. So actually, there is a very beautiful project also supported by Switzerland, showing actually developing and making public and making visible both Abkhaz and Georgian perspective, and also exchanging some, showing for example what happens on the other side, or the point of view of the other side, to make known the point of view of the other side. So this is maybe rather like a society-based project, but there are many initiatives going on. For example, the Artas Foundation works on the level of arts. Artas Foundation is based in Zurich. They have very beautiful initiatives of exchange on the level of arts, and also of like education. People sometimes also are invited to Switzerland to follow classes and to meet and so on. This is rather like probably called sectorial dialogue. What is on a level of in certain level, on certain levels. Or what we can also do, of course, is trilateral contact among scholars. It's also a very interesting thing. We had a project like that about 10 years ago with Swiss Peace. So this is something also that can it be interesting, especially for raising awareness about the other side and getting to know, and that's an example, yes. But it is rather society-based. So no, and the diplomatic initiatives, maybe you should ask Jean-Marc.
Yes, and we actually did receive a question in the meantime that was explicitly.
Excuse
sorry?
me.
Yes.
Can I explain? I'm from Abkhazia. I was born in Sukhumi. Sukhumi, Abkhazia, and Tskhinvali region are Georgian territories. They are occupied now. And please do not separate, because this is Georgia. Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region are, both of them are Georgian territories. And it is so essential to emphasize this. At the same time, when we talk about race awareness, we are talking about occupied territories, where now fundamental rights are broken in these territories. We face very, how to say, violations of fundamental rights every single day in occupied territories of Georgia, I mean Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region. Now, unfortunately, there is no international instrument that will be able to have access to these occupied territories. And this means that we need absolutely different strategy how to enhance communication among these parties. Firstly, we need to establish a new international mechanism, and through this international mechanism, we need to know or to monitor what kind of situation we have inside occupied territories. If we have such a lack of international tools, we could not say about raising awareness when we face every single day how Georgians are not able to move freely in the 21st century, how we face infringement of the right to life, right to receive education in a Georgian language, or other, violations of fundamental rights. And first of all, we need to focus on these issues, and we need to focus on establishment on real international mechanism in order to provide access and provide monitoring over these occupied territories. Because I think that in a 21st century, there is no place occupied territory. There is no place artificial barrier. And we can to find solution, of course, through support of international community. But we need more tangible mechanism for resolving these problems in reality. And we need to think about these more, how to say, more globally, not just only in the context of resilience. No, we unfortunately face a lot of challenges, and these challenges demand more tangible tools for protection of international norms. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this impressive testimony of someone who grew up in now occupied part of Georgia. And yes, this obviously is a problem. And will we be able to have such mechanisms maybe in the future? The future will tell. And we are running out of time, but future is the key word that I would maybe also use for the last few minutes that we have to look forward, to have your perspectives on how this will develop. I was going to give the word to Shomar quickly before, and I tried to include one more question that was sent to us, and maybe you can include that in your response to how this topic may evolve in the next 5 to 10 years. And the question is regarding artificial intelligence. Does this make the problem worse, or maybe to the contrary, does it help to actually in the sense of giving a tool of defense to societies and states that is strong as well?
You're directing the question to me?
Yes.
So basically the future of hybrid warfare, correct?
Yes, and maybe, well, this artificial intelligence question, someone sent us who thought you could reply to it. If you can, sure. You are welcome to. Otherwise, maybe someone else.
Sure. No. Yeah, gladly to. Because I'm working heavily on the militarization of artificial intelligence. So as I said at the beginning of this webinar. What makes hybrid new or unique now is really the development of technologies that are enabling new ways for influence, for manipulation, and for coercion. And so if we talk about artificial intelligence, if you remember 2016 US presidential election, there was a scandal, Oxford Analytica, that was based on people filling some surveys online. So the data that they were leaving behind were collected. And then based on this, you could create a profile of the people's choice, interest, and potential vote. And so basically what the Russian did was or Cambridge Analytica did was to target, if you want, advertising, so that these people would be driven into a specific way for voting. Now, fast forward with AI, what we could see in the future is actually using specific manipulation at a global scale, because AI would be able to process a lot of information, automatize these processes. And so what you would get is specific advertising, for instance, that would drive you to adopt a specific position. And so you could do that at the scale of an entire country, because once you develop the algorithm, you can scale it up very, very quickly. So this is one way where our AI could be used in an hybrid fashion. There are other ways that deal with, for instance, neurotechnologies, where you can directly have an impact on people's brain and thoughts. But you basically have a lot of different scenarios. The bottom line here is that with development in emerging technology, there is a growing democratization of this technology. And what we see is that people or technology can be repurposed outside of specific objective. And so you will always find ways to repurpose technology in a malicious or malign way. And that will increase, if you want, the scope of potential application of hybrid tactics.
Thank you. Maybe, yes, Cécile Truyet.
Thank you. I see that we have 1 minute left, so I just want very briefly to say, to respond maybe also to Ms. Bornate. So of course, Georgia is, I mean, Abkhazia and South Ossetia is part of Georgia in terms of international law, but also it is a territory of contested sovereignty. So I think it is not possible to go over this fact also. So I think really, if we talk about the future, it is also very important to move beyond the mere narrative of occupied territories and to listen to the other side. I think this could be very interesting also to develop a dialogue at this level, which has to be done sooner or later. And that's my wish, actually, really, that there can be found a solution which is good for everybody, for the territory, for the populations of all sides. And I wish to the world, actually, that this is reached not only in Georgia, but in the different areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see Emil Aftaliani has come back. Maybe also to you, what's your view on the future in this field?
Thank you. Yes, I would basically say that there are several levels on which we should be sort of trying to settle our problematic issues regarding the conflicts Georgia has, and not only Georgia, but also Moldova and Ukraine. Well, the several levels, and one of them is, of course, geopolitical. Then you've got the population to population. Then you also have the basically the level of education, and on all those levels, unfortunately, we do not have any meaningful progress. As I said earlier, some incredible work is being done by various NGOs working in Abkhazia and the rest of Georgia, but we at the same time need to sort of work on a bit wider level. And I think the biggest step would be just to decrease geopolitical tensions and this rivalry of being either with the West or with the East, and in the East I mean Russia in that case. That simply kills the possibility to basically to decrease tensions around those problematic regions, and to find some meaningful progress, to make some meaningful progress. And this goes, of course, to politicians, first of all, and to their understanding of geopolitical processes in the region. And it depends not so much, not only on Georgian politicians, but also on Russian politicians and European politicians, and most of all on US politicians. So basically, first, I think you need to decrease those tensions, geopolitical tensions, then you, or at the same time, work on grassroots level, population to population. And during this discussion, of course, the interesting question of scholarly cooperation was raised. And I think this is a very interesting issue, because scholars are those people who are able to move beyond nationalistic narratives and sort of try to build bridges between two people. And but at the same time, I mean, for Georgia, it eventually all goes to international law and norms and so on, whereby it's a sovereign territory of Georgia. And of course, I agree that we need to go beyond the nationalistic approaches, and we need to talk to the other side, and that's for sure. And that's actually what the Georgian government actually preaches basically on a daily basis. But when you look at the concept of the world order and liberal internationalism and so on, what it preaches basically, and what we have in terms of international law, one needs to understand that that's as a part of Georgia, which the question which probably, and 100% sure that almost all successive Georgian governments will be adhering to. So the other side should understand this concept too. So basically, it's very tricky thing to manage two completely different understandings of sovereignty and so on. But I believe that at the very lowest level, I would say, the first level of what should be done, that's decrease of geopolitical tensions, and of course, maybe scholarly cooperation, which will be a basis for more people-to-people contact.
Thank you, Mr. Avdaliani, for those hopeful perspectives nevertheless. And yes, lastly to Ms. Burkadze, if you can, please be a bit briefer in overtime already.
Now, I will try to be very to make my conclusion very briefly. Of course, I strongly believe that it's important to build the bridges, but based on respect, based on protection of Georgia's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and fundamental norms of international law. This is my belief. Thank you so much.
that was indeed very brief. Thanks a lot for this discussion. I think it could go on for a lot longer.
Dr. Rascha, we should also thank you necessarily, at least His Excellency Ambassador of Georgia to Switzerland, who has helped us a lot to set up this webinar. So thank you, Ambassador. And just to express my gratitude as well. I just forgot it to mention at the very beginning. Sorry.
Yes, that's very important. Thanks a lot also from my side to the ambassador. I was just going to say, I think we got a good understanding in this discussion that, yeah, that we have really two levels of working on this top-down level of presidents meeting, maybe in Geneva, maybe somewhere else, but also really this bottom-up aspects of societies that build more resilience and of building bridges hopefully in the future. So yeah, thanks for joining us today from Georgia, from Switzerland, or from wherever you called in. Thanks a lot.